Today, our topic is a little bit of a downer. 5 ways to lose your real estate license. It may not be exactly 5, but the reason we're talking about this is because what we see in the Real Estate Commission's disciplinary actions, a common thread of things that are avoidable. And I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in, just trying to keep your clients happy that occasionally you'll miss what you think is a little step and it ends up being a big step. So today we're going to discuss some of the case studies or reports from the Real Estate Commission's disciplinary actions. What I'm going to do is read portions of a few of these, and then we're going to talk over what went wrong here. How could this have been avoided? So this one is from earlier in the year, in February. So this commission found that this particular broker in charge, the BIC, as I'll refer to it, she listed some properties for sale, and this agent knew that there were some heirs involved that needed to sign. So the situation was husband and wife own the property together, they get divorced, and then husband passed away. So then he had children. So rather than tell the closing attorney, even though this agent knew that, represented to all the parties that former wife was actually widowed, that they were married at the time. Why do you think she did that? Or what was the shortcut here?
Sure. It might mean that less heirs have to sign the deed to convey the property. Maybe there was some, discord among the family members, the wife and the heirs to the ex-husband. So just trying to cut a corner here.
Yeah. In fact, it worked on the first property. So the first of the 2 properties representing that the seller was widowed, all the proceeds went to that seller. But the closing attorney on the second property figured it out, and the agent still didn't tell anyone involved. So it was still representing that the person was widowed.
Not only did she fail to disclose, she did it on purpose. I think, in fact, the commission stated that she said, well, the closing attorney will catch this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even read that part.
So she knew it, and she, just on purpose didn't do what she was supposed to do.
Yeah, reading this, the commission's not saying it, but if you're reading between the lines, it sounds as if the commission felt that the broker was intentionally trying to get the easy way out of this. So the lesson here, I think, is if the sale of the property involves an estate, let everybody know and make everybody sign. Now, the next one I have here, this was a reprimand in June of 2019. This happened in April of this year, but in 2019, this particular agent represented a buyer in the purchase of a residential property that included a mobile home. So here's this sentence starts out good and ends bad. The agent obtained and reviewed a copy of the septic permit during the due diligence period. Good. That's the part where we're good. But this is where it goes bad. Failed to notice or discuss with her buyer client that the septic permit specified 3 bedrooms, while the subject property was listed as having 4 bedrooms. So talk to me a little bit about, I think it's obvious how this could have been avoided, but what do you think about that? Because it's pretty big to get a reprimand for what some people might say is not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and it is a big deal, right? Because your buyer's buying a home on the assumption that it's 4 bedroom when in fact it's only 3. So they're going to run into some trouble when they try to sell the property, and they can no longer sell it as a 4 bedroom. They're not going to get the amount of money for the home that they anticipated. So it is a big deal, and sometimes we see in the opinions where, in this case, it sounds like the agent just overlooked or was inadvertent, wasn't thorough, what have you. But then in other times we see total misrepresentation. They know, they're aware, and they continue to list the property with incorrect number of bedrooms for the septic system.
Like, you guys get busy, it's tough. You get the document and you look at it and you're like, great, got the septic permit, check that off the list. Very next item on your checklist should be compare the number of bedrooms to the listing. So if you're listening to this like, ooh, I don't want to get into that mess, make that the very next thing on your checklist. Obtain and review copy of the septic permit, compare it to the listing.
I want to say one more thing about the septic.
Yeah.
So I think, while it might not seem like a big deal, it can also be a big deal for the agent after the fact, because sometimes it requires a settlement on the part of whichever agent made the error, whether it was intentional or unintentional. Sometimes we see where the agent has to settle with the buyer to compensate them for the lack of the number of bedrooms or the reduction in the number of bedrooms. So just to call out there, not only might you be reprimanded or you could lose your license, but you may also have to pay. So No fun.
No.
I noticed one regarding the agent's failure to disclose that there was a class action lawsuit for the siding on a home. And we have some personal experience with this. We had a closing earlier this year where there was a class action suit on the siding, and we had to help the buyer negotiate, what was reasonable under those circumstances. But in the opinion I was reading, the agent knew of the class action, failed to disclose it to the buyers, and then after the buyers closed on the home, they learned of the action, but they were their opportunity to join the action had foreclosed. And so in this case, again, the agent had to settle with the buyers to compensate them for the error. So common theme again, intentional failure to disclose could get you in a lot of trouble with the commission and with your buyer or seller.
Yeah, that's a bad one. When
And if you know something with regard to the property, I guess the message here is disclose it, right? So
yeah, almost always you lean towards disclosure. You learn in real estate school what you don't have to disclose because it's in the best interest of your client, but that's very limited. Almost everything is, if you know it, say. If you see something, say something. Or whatever. If you know it, you need to tell it, because of all of the different ways that it could come back on you if you intentionally hide information or misrepresent.
Okay, so a couple other common themes that I saw in the opinions. One was failure to list the proper square footage, or maybe the agent's reliance only on the tax card rather than also measuring the square footage of the home. So in most cases, I think it appeared to be a reprimand, but in any event, you don't want to misrepresent. You don't want to be reprimanded. And, depending on the severity of it, it could be more than just a reprimand. The other common theme was failure to pull permits. So if you're listing a home that has been renovated at any point in time, it's important to pull the permits. You've got to make sure that the right procedures were followed. Were those permits closed out? Was there, a certificate of compliance if it was just a renovation, something of that sort? So pulling those permits is essential to make sure that that your buyer and your seller are all on the same page with the property.
And a side note on the permits, if your client has done improvements to the property and they didn't pull a permit, don't say they did. Because everyone will find out. There's going to be a problem. Just say it wasn't permitted. Then you can go from there. I agree with you. There's a common thread in all of these, either trying to take a shortcut or conceal facts, or sometimes just rushing,
Yep.
So the agents we work with, they don't do any of these things. They're the best in the state. We know that. But we want to keep it that way. So if you're listening to this and you hopefully picked up a tip or two of, okay, if I'm ever tempted to take the shortcut, or even if I think that the seller's given me all the information about the estate, don't assume. Find a way to find out for sure, because you may get burned by whatever you're being told by your seller. So trust but verify, all that good stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been eye-opening for me, because there's so many of these case studies are very similar. It's like, okay, what can we do to get the word out so people don't keep falling victim to this? But thanks again for listening. Again, this was North Carolina Real Estate Show. Erica Henson, Tiffany Weber, attorneys at Thomas & Weber, and we'll catch you in the next episode.